Hello, I'm Minkailu, and this is Citizen Talks. Citizen Talks is a podcast series brought to you by TRT World Citizen, featuring discussions with humanitarians and activists, artists, and changemakers, exploring the global humanitarian issues that shape our society and the world at large. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Citizen Talks. This is your host, Minkailu, and we are very much honored to be joined today by Hakan Girginer, someone who probably needs no introduction in Turkey, but for our international listeners, he is the creator of the documentary film Su Savaşları, which is Water Wars in English, and the founder of the organization Su Savaşçıları, which means Water Warriors. Hakan, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Actually, I should be thanking you for allowing me to come here and just getting the word out.
So getting that done, let's start a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got started, focusing particularly on the issue of water and just some of the work that you've been involved in.
There's actually nothing extraordinary about me.
Lies.
It's just that really, I mean, I was a kid who kept taking his toys apart all the time. And the only difference between myself and the other kids were I could put them back together. It's just that I really needed to know what made them tick. And it was that curiosity that really just fed me. And over time, I started pursuing whatever technical things that just I came across and became very proficient at it. Mechanical, electrical, electronics, just anything. And that took me to different paths in my life. I studied engineering, I studied other things. And one day I found myself in the middle of a desert. Seriously. It wasn't all happenstance. All my life, I made a point of being useful, helping people. You receive a lot, so you have to give a lot. That's what I believe in. And I was helping people in my own personal capacity. But there was a time when I just found myself in 45-degree weather, centigrade, in the middle of the sub-Saharan Africa, and I panicked.
I would too, in that.
I looked around and I said, this is much bigger than me. What kind of a difference can I make? This is just huge. And that took about 20 minutes. It was just 20 minutes of sheer terror and desperation. I pulled myself together and then started working. And every little bit helps. That goes without saying. And we worked in 45, 50-degree weather there. In a tiny village in Niger, and we found water. I was beside myself. So I take pride in being useful for people in need.
So how did the film Water Wars initially come about? What was the idea or whatever that was the genesis of that? It's quite, it's become quite a sensation, I would say, in Turkey, but for our international listeners who aren't familiar with it.
Answering that requires a short trip back in time.
I got my ticket. Let's go.
Let's go. Turkish culture is very much about water. We've had plenty of water throughout history, and we know as a culture, as Turks, how valuable water is. And it's sacred. Bread is sacred. Water is sacred. We respect water. And a lot of proverbs, a lot of folk stories revolve around water. Having said that, Africa, as far as Turkey is concerned, global positioning and everything, is practically our neighbor. And we do know, as Turks, that people are suffering down there. So a lot of Turkish people, on their own or in, coming together in certain organizations, were trying as best as they can to help the water shortage and the starvation problems in Africa. When we realized that, we actually felt very compelled to document this properly, because a lot of things, documentaries tell the story of life as we know it. And we wanted to go to Africa, do work ourselves. I mean, do whatever work we can ourselves, document that, and let that speak for all that work that is being carried out in the name of humanity. That's how how the whole story came around, really. At first, we didn't honestly, we didn't know how we were going to tackle this. We said, we'll just play it by the ear. I'm not talking about winging the whole thing, but Africa is such a unique continent, unique place all to itself. Every little community has its own specific set of conditions and problems and issues and challenges and all these things. And you have to go there to analyze what's happening on the ground in situ. And we got to do that. It was a huge learning experience. I mean, incredibly steep learning curve for us. But we pulled through, and I'm absolutely proud of all the work we did in that show. That show, at the end of the day, it's a TV show, but it wasn't a show.
Right.
I mean, we were documenting what we were doing, and out of that came a much bigger quest to help as many people as we can and correct whatever mistakes that were made, because you can have good intentions, but you could make mistakes. And the problem is, whatever mistake you're making is going to cost big to those people who have nothing. So you need to be very careful in all the steps you're taking. We do realize that it's a huge responsibility. So it's not just a borehole. It's not just digging a well. Because if you dig a well or just start boring the ground, you may find water. Yeah, if you're lucky, you'll find water. And in about 6 months or so, that well's going to collapse and it'll just go dry. That's where you have to be really careful, because one of the worst things you can do in life is to give someone hope when they have none and then take it back. There's no restoring any kind of faith after that. So in all our projects, sustainability is our flag. It's really important for us. And we're in Africa right now, primarily in Africa, and we're doing a lot of work. And I'll tell you about the work we do briefly. But sustainability is what we're watching out more than anything else. We watch our projects for 10 years once they're completed. And over the course of 10 years, local communities become very adept at using that project and dealing with whatever problems they may face. And at the end of a 10-year period, we really shake hands and turn everything over to them. We feel compelled to watch and make sure nothing goes wrong, because once you give hope to someone, when they have none, you can't take that back.
Yeah. I definitely want to get more into the details of the work that you're doing as we move on here. Before that, though, I wanted to talk sort of more broadly about the issue of water, globally speaking. Obviously, this is an issue that's much more in the public eye these days. It's something that I think people are more cognizant of today. From a broad global perspective, how would you describe the current situation regarding water resources, specifically, fresh water, potable drinking water, and access to potable drinking water?
Earth, this planet we're living on, is covered with water. Unfortunately, it's salt water. And depending on who's figuring out the calculations and everything, about maybe 1 to 3% of that water is usable fresh water, usable for us, that we can safely use and drink and use for hygiene and everything. And out of that total reserve, we can access maybe half. And the amount of water on this planet never changes. This is a closed circuit, closed system. No water leaves this planet. No water is brought into this planet from outside. We could be drinking the same water a dinosaur may have drank whenever they lived, 160 million years ago. It's always the same water. This planet is a beautiful way of filtering, cleaning, and refreshing that water, that fresh water, for us to use. And it's a beautiful system that recycles. We have a couple of problems. The Earth's population is increasing. I mean, we just exceeded the 8 billion mark.
Yeah, I heard that.
We're more crowded than ever now. So that means fewer sips per capita, per person. We're also polluting the water as fast and as best as we can, like it's going out of style. I was in Kathmandu. Bagmati River runs through Kathmandu. It's a holy river. It's truly a sacred river, but it's so polluted, it can't flow anymore. I mean, it's thicker than water. I mean, it's supposed to be water, right? Yeah. It's a river.
Yeah.
It is so thick with pollution, it can hardly flow now. That's sad. It's thought-provoking, but we need to do something about that. In a space of maybe 45, 50 kilometers from its original source, that river gets so incredibly polluted, it can't flow anymore. And that's just one example. We do that with the oceans. We do this with underground groundwater. We do this with all kinds of surface water. We're basically slowly committing suicide, and we may not be aware of that yet. We're hurting ourselves.
Yeah, we do that a lot. So if we're talking like regionally, where are the areas where this is sort of reached like a crisis point, like a flashpoint, where it's drumming up a lot of issues, and it's not a 5-year, 10-year away sort of issue. It's like today, right now, we're having big problems.
Back in the 80s, there were telltale signs of these flashpoints you were talking about. And back then, the whole idea was dismissed, and there were different reasons, political, economic, financial, all kinds of different reasons behind that. And the idea boiled down to global warming or climate change. That sort of depends on what side of the aisle you're on and all that stuff.
Right.
So leaving all the political differences aside, we do have a problem. I mean, everybody knows that now. Where it's more prevalent, where the flashpoints are, you just need to look at the world map. There are several colors, blues, greens, yellows in the world map. That yellow belt closer to the equator is where we're feeling the sting of lack of water the most. Because the temperature is rising, because we're just literally losing water through evaporation, surface water is under threat in those areas. When the temperature rises, you get other problems, health problems, stuff that you don't want growing in the water. Coupled with massive overpopulation, it leads to very serious problems. 3 out of 5 children, 3 out of 10 children in Africa can't see their 5th birthday. That mortality rate in itself is heart-wrenching. But using words like heart-wrenching is easy when you're sitting in a studio, all nice and everything. You need to be out there on the field and just experience it and see it yourself. Unhealthy communities, people. Look, we take water with us when we go there. little bottles, and we just keep them in the cars so that they're not baking under the sun. We take them out and just have sips and everything. I was passing my water around to little kids in the villages, and some adults too. I mean, I just want to share my water. You know what they do? They unscrew the bottle, take the cap, put just a tiny bit of water inside that cap, drink that, thank me, and pass the bottle. We all know that much water, just that little water, is not going to do anything. It's not going to quench your thirst. It's not going to meet your hydration requirements, nothing. But that's all they can get. I have personally watched children dangling a broken piece of just a plastic container in a well. You know, when you lower something in a well, it goes splash, right? No, this went chunk-ka-tunk. And they just drag this in the bottom for a while, and then they pull it out. All you have is mud in that thing. They take that mud, they squeeze it and suck that mud. That is serious.
Yeah.
That is really serious. Now, you're talking about flashpoints. As far as I'm concerned, that is a major flashpoint. We can do quite a few things about that. We can't change everything all at once. All of these problems were brewing slowly. You know, it takes a pot of water to brew, and you don't see a whole lot of action in that pot. When it starts boiling, you see all the action, right? When things are about to boil over, we can either delay that boiling, postpone it as best as we can, but that's not killing the problem itself, or we can do other things to remedy the problem. If you want to remedy the problem, one of the things we can do is create awareness, because water is essential to life. We can't live without oxygen. We can't live without water. I mean, that's a given. In order to continue living on this planet as human species, the human race, we have to make sure we do have water for tomorrow and the day after, for our children, for their children, for the next generation, and maybe for us too, because, I mean, these things can happen. They can turn on a dime. The first and the most important step is to create awareness. And that's why I was thanking you in the beginning, because we feel like we have to spread this word and create this awareness. The problem is not going to go away all by itself, and ignoring is not going to help. I'm sorry, I do sound serious. I'm not an alarmist. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but there are serious issues in life, and water is one of them.
Yeah.
We're working in Africa right now, but that problem is going to knock on our door sometime in the future, and I don't know how soon. It could be just, in the near future. We don't know that. But if we create the necessary awareness for this, we can collectively start taking the necessary steps for a better world.
Yeah.
So that helps all of us.
Yeah. I'm going to enjoy the sip of water while I still can. So one thing that I was curious about, that I know a little about it, but I'm not very well versed in it. What's our, you say 1 to 3% of the world's water is actually potable drinking water. Yes. What's our primary source of water? Like, where is most of it coming from? And then what are the consequences when people have sort of scarcity and then they have to turn to alternative sources? For example, I know that there's like issues when you start digging into groundwater, for example.
Oh, yes.
So what's the deal with that specifically?
Our primary source for water is obviously surface water. By surface water, I'm talking about lakes, streams, creeks, rivers, whatnot.
Yeah.
And whatever water is accumulating on the surface of the earth, that comes through rain or snowfall. It could be coming down from the mountains. And if you don't do anything to that water, it'll find its way all the way into the ocean, the sea. So we intercept and use it for hydroelectric power sometimes, in some cases, but mostly for our own consumption. It's a double-edged sword because historically, that was a very good question, by the way. I mean, it opens
thank you.
very different areas to just peek into and talk about.
Yeah.
But I need to bring this up real quick. Historically, when you were going to set up a community, set up tent or whatever, or start a community, you would look for a specific spot that would be very close to natural resources, whatever resources you needed, and water is number one on your list. Right. Today, in the modern world, if you look at Istanbul, if you look at Tokyo, for example, or Los Angeles, or whatever city, we're breaking tradition now. We're bringing the resources to these cities, to these communities. And these are huge communities. Istanbul is 20 million, give or take. The official number may not be that, but I mean, you can easily round it up to that.
It feels like 50 million during rush hour. I can tell you that from...
You're right. Yeah, exactly. So what we're doing is, it's quite unnatural, actually. We're bringing the resources to these huge communities. That's no way to live. That's not sustainable. And what you end up doing is you're diverting a few rivers here and there. You're building dams. You're trying to supply the city with fresh water 24/7, 365 days a year, no interruptions. And you're basically dependent on the rain, snowfall, depending on the climate. We're having a rather warm and dry winter right now.
Yeah.
That's cause for major concern come summertime. We need to store all the water we can right now. So we can all foresee there's going to be a problem. Now, you talked about alternate ways of getting our water. There are alternate ways. The first and the most immediate one is groundwater. As far as I'm concerned, groundwater is sacred. Because when you start using groundwater, and I do owe you an explanation when I say that, but I'll get to that. When you start getting into the groundwater, you start changing the water regime in the ground. That in itself does not help us at all. And you can deplete that easily. And if you alter the course of water underground, it causes untold problems, from sinkholes to, in some cases, earthquakes, to just massive drought and maybe altered vegetation on land, just all kinds of different things. We are a truly ingenious species. I mean, we're clever. We can adapt. We can harvest water from the air. It can be done.
Really?
I've seen exactly. Like, think of a nice valley, beautiful breeze coming down the mountains. You erect these incredibly fine mesh nets, and they trap all the moisture in the air.
Huh.
It condenses down, and that's seriously.
I've never heard of that.
And you can collect water. It doesn't yield tons and tons and tons of water, but it yields enough water to sustain a small community for like drinking purposes. It's on a rather experimental level right now.
Yeah.
It's not used on a large scale all over the world, but it's a proven technology. I mean, the proof of concept has passed the test.
And is that something that would have less sort of, the groundwater, right, affecting geology and all these other problems it's causing? Is that something that would have less sort of ecological impact?
I mean, I purposely picked a rather extreme example for you when I was talking about alternate ways, to be able to demonstrate how far we can go in our thinking out of the box.
Yeah.
To get the water we need, because we have to. At the end of the day, we gotta get that water.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is desalination. Desalination in the old days was done through just boiling water, basically. When you're just boiling water, you're causing a lot of harm for the environment. You're using incredible resources to boil that, to get that steam, energy. And then your byproduct is hot, and when you're discharging it out into your water source, the sea in this case, over time you end up raising the temperatures. It affects the sea life, the marine life. I mean, just one thing leads to another, and it just becomes a rather undesirable method.
Right.
Over time, technology just forges on, and today, for desalination, we're using membranes. When I say membranes, don't think of like a really thin membrane like the onion skin. These membranes are really huge, big, beefy units. And you have to force water with incredible pressure through them. The trick is these membranes, the porosity is just calculated just so very carefully where water molecules can pass through, but sodium and sodium chloride can't. So they do saturate after a while. You need to replace them, or maybe in some cases they can be washed and reused and everything. And now they have cut the energy cost by about 2/3 so far, and I'm sure they'll just keep reducing it through technology. But we can get water from the ocean, from the sea, through desalination. It takes a huge initial investment. I mean, you end up burying a ton of money in the ground to do that.
Yeah.
But we can get it. It's costly, but what isn't?
Is that a solution that you like? Like, are there any other sort of alternative means of extracting water that you find to be more beneficial and sustainable in the long term than,
When it comes to something as vital as water, I don't think approvals are going to matter much if that is the only way you can get
we're going to do
water. So, I mean, we will do it and deal with the consequences, I'm sure. That's how things progress. I mean, everything we've done so far, from the H-bomb to whatever you can imagine, stocking lakes with trout, whatever you can imagine. It was all trial and error. And, we started seeing the consequences and everything, and either modified our ways or just, stopped doing it altogether so far. So time will tell. We're not down to a single alternative yet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We still have water, but this is the time we should be talking about what we should be doing.
We're at sort of a turning point.
I mean, think about mass hysteria, just lack of water, not being able to get any. That would be catastrophic.
That would be the collapse of most of the civilizations that we've come to know and be familiar with, I'm sure.
We do quite a few. We do a lot of work in Africa for a number of reasons. One of the reasons why we do the work we do is to find ways to deal with a lack of water. We do small-scale work there. We do micro-development projects, actually.
Yeah.
But these micro-development projects give us enough data where we can compile all that and keep it in our pocket to use in the form of solutions when these problems knock on our doors here in Turkey or in some other Western society.
Right.
But I know we're talking about bleak stuff. I know we're not talking about, it's not all fun and games and, roses and everything, but this is real. This is as real as it gets.
Very much so. Actually, my mom's going to love this because I'm sure she'll listen to this. She's been talking about this issue for a very long time. It's ever since I was maybe not a child, but I think even since I was a teenager. She's like, oh, the water problems are coming. They're coming. So, Mom, you were right. So
it is. It is upon us. Seriously. I don't want to sound like a fear monger.
The truth is the truth. The reality is what it is.
The truth is the truth, though, because you were talking about flashpoints. I was talking about, the yellow belt on the map. When you go see these things in person, it hits you. It brings about a sense of duty where you feel you have to do something about that. Seeing starving people, seeing extreme poverty, seeing lack of water to the point where people are dying. Little babies are people too. You want to do something. That's why we have endeavored into these micro development projects. They're not just water projects.
Right.
I am a part of IDEA Universal.
Right.
IDEA. It's International Development and Environmental Association, actually. It's just an acronym. And it's a universal idea. So that's why we said IDEA Universal. We go and we build smart villages. And in the course of building a smart village, the first and the most important step is finding water. Once we find the water for the village, we install plumbing in the village. We take water to all the dwellings. They could be huts, they could be anything, but we just take water to all the dwellings. And we branch some of that water off and take it into a communal farming plot or area. We do set aside a certain part of the land for communal farming. And then we teach the village seed banking. We take their traditional seeds, local, regional seeds, and it's a learning process for us too. But you have to think of the next harvest, the next year and everything. So with proper seed banking and proper smart watering, and I'll get to that, those villages are able to get 4 harvests a year. And these are starving villages. These are villages where mothers are boiling tree leaves for their children, or they're eating corn husks, or they're eating tree bark. I mean, I have seen these things. From that level of starvation, they start getting 4 harvests a year. Not only that food is enough for the community, for the village, but they can sell it in the marketplace and bring money into the village. When we get water for the village, it means a few things for the people in that community. Kids or adults do not have to walk for hours for water every single day. Kids, the children, there's a job description for being a child. You have to play. Because you learn life, when you're a child, you learn life through play.
Right.
Then if they're not walking for water for hours every single day, they have time to play and learn life and get to find out what things are and learn about each other and themselves. And the second important thing is education. So we build a school in these villages. We bring an electric light using solar panels and everything so they can study. We build a library so they can find all the resources and all the reference material for whatever they're studying. We try and look at the complete picture, and we build these villages. And building a single village takes a lot of work because you have to learn the conditions, the lay of the land, the specific challenges for that particular community. And we could have built 1 village so far, and I would be just very proud of that. To this day, we have completed just over 250 villages. That's a source of just immense pride for us.
Yeah, it's quite an accomplishment.
And we keep working on it. And we do work on individual water projects and everything too. So we finished well over 2,000 projects so far.
Yeah.
But the villages are the most important thing for us.
Yeah. So the idea with IDEA Universal is to
Let me do this.
The smart villages is like it's a holistic sort of program where you deal with all the different elements that are leading to whatever the circumstances that they're in. You're dealing with the water, you're dealing with the agriculture, you're dealing with education, you're dealing with electricity, and sort of putting that all together into a more comprehensive solution. Do you? I want to also give a shout out to IDEA Universal because this last year in 2021, actually the founder of IDEA Universal, Jalloh, was one of World Citizen's award winners for the TRT World Citizen Awards. I believe you were also at the awards this year. Yeah, so we're good friends of Haidari, and we're big fans of the work you guys are doing.
Thank you very much.
I mean, how did you sort of get involved working together and sort of coming up with this methodology, this framework for developing out these villages, and what's been, I guess, the impact that you've seen since the time that you got involved?
In English, there are several different words that'll describe helping someone. You can say aid, you can say assistance, you can say relief, you can say help. And all these mean specific things in their own context or whatever way they're using them. In Turkish, unfortunately, there is yardım. When you're talking about single words, not descriptive phrases. Descriptive phrases are something else. It just makes communication a little more difficult. But yardım. Now, when you're talking about yardım, help, or assistance, or aid, or relief, you have to make something very clear. There are some distinctions you need to make. A lot of people, in the name of helping those people in Africa, send some planes over with, bags of food,
Right?
and or maybe cardboard boxes like care packages and whatnot. And in some cases, they just, they don't even land. They just drop these from the air as they do low passes.
And that's the most polite way to do it.
It is incredibly polite, and half the stuff they dump from the planes ends up in inaccessible spots, in marshes, down some weird cliffs and whatnot, or in the middle of some wild animals.
Yeah.
So it just goes to waste.
Foolish.
It is foolish. And I don't know, a couple of sacks of rice to a village really doesn't mean anything. It's just like a couple of drops of water on a hot stove.
Yeah.
There are quite a few drawbacks to these things. If you keep sending food to people, you end up creating a hungry and aid-dependent community with their hands out all the time.
Yeah.
That goes contrary to the honor aspect of being a human being. You start compromising a part of yourself.
Yeah.
If you're living like this. What we're doing is, just like in the classical example, like teaching someone to fish instead of handing him a fish. We try and take that a step further, and we try and build a fish farm and learn how to do that with the particular conditions of that specific community, and learn the process ourselves too. So, remember I was talking about a very steep learning curve.
Yeah.
It is a steep learning curve, but we do go with not expectations, but we're prepared for those challenges. So we take our time, we do the work, and we learn what exactly should be done. And instead of airdropping, wait, when you say airdropping, it sounds way too commercial and goes to other things. Dropping food from the air.
Yeah.
It just doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
We try and get to a point where these people are raising their own crops, using their resources as economically and as smart as humanly possible, so that they can start thinking about a tomorrow. Because hungry people can't think about tomorrow. You're hungry today. You try and take care of today. So it's the longevity, it's the sustainability, it's all these things that really matter for us. And we try and we're always trying to find new projects because Africa is huge, millions of villages. It feels like billions of villages, really, because it's a gigantic village continent. There are very few cities in Africa. Each country has a capital, and then, not very many cities after that. And the whole continent is just dotted with villages that seem to be separated by kilometers or miles. They're not very close to each other. And sometimes the border runs through one village because no one cared. They just drew the line on the map and it happens to intersect a village. But it's just villages. And we're trying to do whatever we can, one village at a time.
So you mentioned that you guys are earlier that you guys are like monitoring the projects that you do
Yes.
in the long term. So what are the results that you've been seeing like over 1 year, 5 years, 10 years after sort of working with the villages, successfully implementing these projects, and they've kind of figured it out and they have these systems that are now running? You know, what are the results that you've seen from that?
We use technology, basically, and human contacts to monitor the projects we have completed. There are very cute little smart devices you can add into your plumbing system, and they literally just link to satellites. And we can, and they just raise a red flag when like certain conditions exist. No water has gone through the thing for X amount of hours, that sort of thing. So we're monitoring quite a few of our projects through just a satellite network that's available and free to everyone. They have marketplaces in Africa, and people from the villages, like people from 40 or 50 different villages, go to these huge marketplaces once every 4 weeks, once every 6 weeks or so, and they cover a lot of ground. They just travel to get to these things. We send our volunteers to these marketplaces, and they just talk to people, and they know who to find if they have a problem, and that in itself is a beautiful network. And because not only a person can tell you about their own village, they'll tell you about their neighboring village too, and because they'll know. So you do keep your finger on the pulse, if that's a way of expressing it. You literally do keep your finger on the pulse,
Yeah.
and get an idea about what things are really like in that region. There are times when we just hire a drone operator from a city, and we just pay their daily rates, and then which is not much in Africa really. And then I ask them to please drive or travel out to these villages and fly over those villages for maybe 10 minutes each. 10 minutes, a 10-minute footage from about 80 meters up, or maybe 50 meters up in a village, tells you the whole story. You know where people are going to get water, you know where the animals are going to get water, you know if they're making trips to the old wells, which are not sanitary, because we don't destroy stuff. I mean, if there's an old, hand-dug well in a village, and if we have our modern systems installed, we don't destroy that, obviously. It just stays there. But we need to monitor and see if they're going back to that well, because if they are, it means there's a problem with the system we have built.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that really gives us an idea. We get those, we get footage from all these villages. We do, innovation is our thing. We do all kinds of smart, innovative ways and things and methods and methodologies to really watch out what's going on. We also have quite a few volunteers, quite a few people that we pay, actually. I mean, we don't pay them a fortune, obviously, but they do need to get paid, and they generate a lot of reports on their own as well. So all of that comes to us, and if anything happens, we'll know.
Yeah. So in terms of the impacts that you see, right? So a village that's gone through the whole process and they've successfully implemented the model, what does that look like, 10 years later? What does that village look like?
10 years later, you definitely see healthier people. They do start making plans. We also provide, as part of our plan, we do provide microcredits, $100
for like business
to light the fire, to
Yeah.
start a business. That's a lot of money in Africa.
Yeah.
That'll buy you sewing machines. That'll buy you just all kinds of different things. At the end of 10 years, you definitely see a healthier community where children are not dying, where they're going to school, they're playing football, they're going to school, they're just growing up to be productive adults. Young males do not have to migrate or travel to the Western world, because they do. mostly
Yeah.
in illegal ways, to just scrape a living and send some money back to their village or back home. They don't have to do that anymore. Families do stay intact, which is, look, that's incredibly important, because we're talking about the criminal elements. We're talking about undesirable, criminal activity, this,
Yeah.
that, and everything else. Unfortunately, when people are left in a position to abandon their communities, their families, and look for whatever means, whatever ways they can to generate some money to take care of them, they go, I don't know, to the States, to Europe, in whatever. I'm sure we've heard the
Yeah.
stories, we've seen the stories.
Oh yeah.
They go, and since these are inexperienced people, they do get in crime. They're sometimes sucked into crime. I mean, all kinds of really bad things happen. People die. People become a burden for whatever communities they're relocated to. I'm sorry for rambling on, but at the end of the 10 years, you see these things not happening. Families do stay intact, and that just makes us proud. It's not just the family. The whole fabric of the community is intact then. You're asking about, the repercussions or consequences of our projects. Local governments get to find out about these communities, because these are totally, completely forgotten, lost communities. They're last mile communities. In the Western world, we have to be counted. Like, we all have ID numbers, because our governments need to collect taxes from what we do. So we're all given ID numbers so that we can pay taxes. In Africa, things don't work that way. Most countries in Africa finance their economies through basically giving away their national and natural resources,
Right.
through capitulations and whatever. Now, when that's the question, the average citizen does not come into play. You're not collecting taxes from them.
Yeah.
So if you're not collecting taxes from your people, you don't count them. When you don't count them, you don't know who lives where.
Nor do you care about providing them any benefits.
Exactly. So it's the word taxation, representation.
Yeah.
They're not taxed, they're not represented. So there are naturally, unfortunately, forgotten communities. Why am I trying to explain all this? We find these forgotten communities, forgotten villages, lost villages, and do all this work. When we do that, we stir the pot in a good way. So the local governments, when they find out about the work we do, they go, oh yeah, there's a village there. There are some people there, and you've done all this work already. So like in one case, they sent in 2 bulldozers.
Yeah.
It used to take us an hour and a half, close to 2 hours, just really bumpy, horrible ride to get to this one village. They sent 2 bulldozers. They didn't destroy the woods, the jungle. They didn't do any of that. They just found their way through the jungle. Two bulldozers just cut a swath. And now it takes 15, 20 minutes to get there. We ended up building the neighboring community as well. So there are 2 smart villages there right now. This is in Zanzibar, in central Zanzibar. But the beauty is, since the local government knows about that, they built a dispensary there too. So when we do something, it echoes. I mean, the local governments, or sometimes the governments, their national governments, they do respond to that. They may build a road. They may just add something. So it truly starts a fire in a good way. You were talking about the consequences. What happens? These beautiful things happen. They build a school sometimes, and they get to know that community. It's not lost or forgotten anymore. People don't die in vain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Human dignity is
Yeah.
a very precious thing we need to preserve.
So in a way, it sort of, increases, I guess, the value of that community so much, even in the mind of the state, that they're willing now to commit resources to them.
Exactly.
So that's
Exactly.
yeah, that's a big accomplishment. Really, it's a big accomplishment. So for people who, because here we're all about action, we're all about getting our audience involved, we're all about having people sort of not just listen and think about things, but to actually take action. How can people get more involved in this? How can they perhaps even get involved or provide benefit to the work that you're doing?
Uh, as far as our audience is concerned, um, it's real simple. Um, just type Idea Universal in your favorite search engine, whatever search engine is. It'll take you to our website, to our websites. If you're in social media, it'll take you to our social media accounts in Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, anywhere. Um, just all you need to do is type seriously Idea Universal. That's it.
You see it right there.
It's ideauniversal.org or .org or Su Savaşçıları. Well, I mean, for English-speaking, non-Turkish-speaking listeners, it could not be the easiest thing to type that. But just type in Idea Universal, and you'll find us, and we'll find you.
Great.
Exactly.
You guys heard it here. Go to ideauniversal.org, and you can find everything that you need to know about the work that Hayri and Hakan have been doing. Hakan, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there any final message that you want to leave with our audience? Is there any last word that you want to say about water, about the work you're doing, about anything really?
We do all the work through the donations of about 30,000 or so individuals in Turkey and about maybe 100,000 individuals around the world. We can't do any of the work without these people who put their good faith in our hands. We owe them the biggest thanks humanly possible, our eternal gratitude. And we need to be thanking these well-meaning people who do want to make a change in the best way possible. We need to thank them endlessly, because without them, there's not much we can do. This is the actual shirt I wear in the field. It gets muddy. If it wasn't for those donations, this shirt would stay clean. Maybe I wouldn't have this shirt. And our efforts would just go to waste. So I owe people out there, you, the biggest thanks I can muster. Thank you.
And we thank you for joining us today. So that has been another episode of Citizen Talks, and we hope that you will join us again next time. This is Minkailu, and you guys have a good one.